Good morning. I have the pleasure today to be here with Ana Barreto. Ana is the Transnational Birth Equity Director for the National Birth Equity Collaborative. And Ana is also a fellow of the UN Fellowship Program for People of African Descent. She's an activist and a researcher at the intersections of issues that involve racial justice, gender, global health, and the arts. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today, Anna. I wanted to start. This is a fateful moment, I think, a historical fateful moment that we're in. And I wanted to ask you to start with a general description of the landscape of the elections in Brazil. If you could give us a sense of your analysis of the outcome, and I'll just open it up.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here. I appreciate you as a friend, as a comrade, as a person and professional. So thank you so much for the invitation. Um, First, I want to say that there is a huge sense of relief after this election. It was a very the background around Brazil that I think is important to have is that Brazil is under democratic crisis since 2016 with the coup of the former president Dilma Rousseff, and then Bolsonaro comes as a leader out of this process. So I think that those two things are important. And then Bolsonaro comes within, when we think about the global context of the extreme right or the far right becoming stronger and stronger in Europe, in the US, and Latin America, and then Brazil, as the figure of Bolsonaro starts to use the same analysis, the same strategies. In Brazil, a country that is highly influenced by the US, by the US evangelicals, by the US conservatives. So it's important to say that Bolsonaro has this huge money machine of fake news, of misinformation, with a population that lacks good quality education, that lacks like sanitation, that, to be honest, even lack a real democratic process as a country. Sueli Carneiro, one of our most brilliant academics, used to say that between the left and the right, I'm still black. And it is true that for a lot of Black Brazilians, there has not been such a difference between a left government and a right government. And I believe that Bolsonaro used that really well. So then we start to see, starting 2018, uh, uh, a very complex, in my opinion, modern ways of um, destabilizing countries. So during the 2018 election, Lula was also a candidate, but he was arrested and put on jail weeks before the elections in a clear way to avoid him to winning. Of course, then the opponent that comes against him in 2018, which is Fernando Haddad, which is from the Workers' Party, very, very well experienced, but he doesn't have the Lula power, right? He doesn't have, and he came out in a way that was very, it was a crisis, a management crisis. Maybe people didn't think that they would go so far and to arrest him and to avoid him to run for the elections. Then we have the pandemic, which it became like a disaster in Brazil, with over 700,000 people dying, and Bolsonaro denying vaccination for the population. At the same time, Bolsonaro used very unfortunately effective tactics of the right, which is the sexual reproductive health agenda, the what they call gender ideology, especially targeting evangelicals. And evangelicals there um, have this idea and this fear that I put it on them that they are being persecuted somehow. So that's the context of Brazil. And this election, which is one of the most competitive, and the difference between them was not even 2%. So Lula won with 50.9% and Bolsonaro with 49.1%. And it's important to say that Bolsonaro starts in front. He start winning that when they start counting the votes. And it was like after 60% or so that then the Lula start to change it. This shows a very divided country at this moment, unfortunately. At the moment, we are having protests of blocking roads in Brazil of Bolsonaro supporters. He refused to acknowledge the results of the elections. He doesn't say that he will not accept it, but he doesn't say that he accepted either. So a couple of years ago, he had a 2 minute speech just to thank people that voted for him, and then he left. And the media was asking, what about the results of the election? So he is still promoting this type of it's I believe that Bolsonaro do this very how can I say, it's a very, that is a Brazilian word for that. It's like a little sonso. It's like he doesn't say it, but he's also not saying it. So then folks kind of keep hanging. And then even like their supporters, so they understand that they say, well, he didn't say that he accepting the elections, that means that he's not. And then for us from the other side, you said, well, at least he didn't say that he doesn't accept it. So it keep people hanging. Um, uh, so just to say a little bit about the context, because I don't want to keep talking much, but I think that Brazil is this highly divided country at the moment. Brazil was always a divided country for different reasons, for racial issues, for poverty issues. So Brazil still refused to provide dignity to more than half of its population. So then we still need to look deeper on why the extreme right keep winning around the world. Maybe there is a failure on capitalism. That is a much more deeper question, in my opinion, than, oh, people are just doing this for ignorance. That's what I want to say. I want to start by saying those kind of like very general context, and then maybe we can deep dive more into them.
Thank you for giving us that layout and a little bit of a deeper history than just the last couple of months of the elections. That's helpful. And I do have a couple of follow up questions. One is precisely what you mentioned, the very slim difference in the electoral results. That although you are alluding to the fact that Brazil, it's not a surprise that Brazil is a divided country, and that this is a result of long historical processes, that still that slim victory of Lula's was smaller than expected, at least than what many observers expected. And I wanted to ask you what you make of that, how we interpret that, and, and also for something more specific, which you already also alluded to, which is the existence of Bolsonarismo, even without Bolsonaro in power, right? Like, what is the significance of that? And in particular, given your own expertise and our own interest, also here at Security and Context, what is the significance of that in particular for racial justice, for gender justice, for LGBTQ plus movements, for women? So that's where I wanted to ask.
Okay, let's go one by one. um, okay, so about the slight difference between them, I see a couple of things here. I see number one, very well organized campaign of vote suppression in Brazil. So different than the US, for example, election days are holidays, and the people, we do not work, so we have the day just to vote. Public transportations are free as well, and the idea is that because this is a democracy and it is a right to vote, the state has the obligation to facilitate this right. So during this election, There were a lot of violations regarding the transportation. So there were a lot of violations saying that it's not free today, that buses are not running. So folks were waiting for hours to get into the bus to go to vote. Um, and I do think that this was part of a very well organized campaign. So there were also parts in the country that was specifically targeted to avoid folks to vote. I believe that the difference would be a little bigger between them if the vote suppressions were not there. And this scares me because I think that this is a tactic that is very well developed in the US that I think that it start to become exported to other places. And if we think about isolated areas of Brazil, like in the Amazon, for example, in the north states, sometimes people need boats to vote, to go to work. Then if there is no boat, it's very easy to promote vote suppression in Brazil. And scares me because I think that this is the beginning of something. Maybe in the next elections, we're going to see more and more. There are testimonies that even in New York, there were some folks dressing as militaries in front of the vote, um, how you call it, in front of the vote place for Brazilians in New York. So there were the
The poll.
poll. Thank you. So there were
Mhm.
there were there were even instances of intimidation. And one day before the election, this Caucasian woman, white woman, was walking in the most rich neighborhood in Sao Paulo. She fall in the street, and there's a black man passing by, and she has a gun, and she started to pointing him, saying that he was the one that pushed her for her to fall into the ground. And there is videos of that. Then the men start running. There is like some shoots to the air, and this is highly intimidating, especially for Black Brazilians. And for me in particular, that I am from São Paulo, I keep thinking that it was a matter of luck that this man is alive. Is because this happened in the most expensive neighborhood of the city. If this was happening in my own neighborhood, she would have shot him. That's what I believe. And there were a couple of instances and a couple of crimes against Bolsonaro supporters, against Lula supporters. And I think that this is important to be said. There was a lot of how you call it, like rich people that have companies telling their workers, you need to vote for this specific candidate. If you don't do that, you're going to lose your job. Or things like, we're going to give free meat uh, for voters of one specific candidate in a country where 33 million people face hunger. So the tactics are very cruel, in my opinion, because our people are desperate, right? Like Brazil is this country, one of the most unequal countries in the world, where the elite lives really well, but our people, they are facing hunger. They don't know if they're gonna eat 3 times a day. And then you have a campaign telling them, we're gonna give you free food if you vote for one specific candidate, or you're gonna lose your very precarious job if you don't vote for one specific candidate. So I think that a lot of that is part of the why the small difference. I also want to say that between the first round and the second round, the level of fake news on the internet was crazy. So Lula is gonna close all the churches. Someone even told me yesterday that one of the fake news that people were saying is, we're gonna start to eat dogs in Brazil if Lula wins. So it's the level, and I think that it might be hard for progressive people to understand, but I think that the level of how well elaborated and organized are those fake news, and how it's like I'm gonna bombard you with this every day, every day, every day. The support of the churches as well, because when we're talking about reproductive justice, that's a taboo, and whoever say that it doesn't support abortion have the votes of a lot of conservatives. It doesn't matter what this person does. So I think that that's just a little of the scenario about what this small difference. Then regarding the Bolsonarismo, yes, um, Bolsonaro represents the conservatives in Brazil, the white people, the former slave owners, many times, um, which is an idea that was there before him and will be there after him. So even when we think about the local elections, right? We have elections for presidents, but also for the Senate, for the House of Representatives. So Bolsonaro now has 187 representatives of his own party, and Lula have 125. So Lula, when he starts his government in January 1st, will also deal with the Senate and a House that is mostly Bolsonaro supporters. So the governance side will also be very difficult. Um, the big names of the Bolsonaro administrations, they were all reelected. So all the ministers of like the main hands, right? The minister Damares, for example, which is a pastor that was the minister of the women and the family. She was one of like the most voted people in the elections. Um, Former ministers of health, even though thousands and thousands of Brazilians died for no reason, for the refusal of the president to provide vaccination. Those those um, those people that were also elected. So we have a huge challenge ahead of us, a huge challenge to rebuild this country. And I don't think the 4 years will be enough. I hope that we can get at least 8. Then about when we're thinking about racial justice and we are thinking about LGBTIQ plus movements and women's movements, this is one of the things that give me hope, I'm gonna say. Um, Even though we were target of the Bolsonaro's campaign, we also were able to elect so many people, right? We elected, I think, 4 Black transgender women for local office. We elected Indigenous women. We elected a lot of LGBTIQ people to the local offices, and this give me hope. I think that the Black movement in Brazil decide after the assassination of Marielle that if they're going to try to kill us, they're going to try to kill us all. We all going to go for elections now and we're going to win this. And I think that this also shows hope to me, even though the violence increased when we're thinking about political violence, especially against Black transgender candidates, the death threats, the online violence increased a lot, but at the same time, they were also elected. Now the question is how we protect them, how we as people, and how this state, because it's much more than about a government. This is about the Brazilian state, how the state provide protection to its public officials in a country that do not see Black people as fully people. That's the challenge. If we are thinking about the level of violence in Brazil is so dehumanizing, if I don't care about this level of violence, how that many Black people dying every day, why should I care about one specific? And I think that shift would be a shift that can make Brazil at least like a real democratic country. If we are able to make that shift, if we are able to understand how we naturalize violence against half of our population. Did I answer your question?
You did. You absolutely, and in fact, you addressed a broader question. I think you started to go very deep already into this question of both the challenges and the hopes for the government ahead. And in fact, I was going to bring it. Of course, this is an enormous moment of importance for Brazilians, but I think the rest of us throughout Latin America have been following and watching very attentively what is unfolding in Brazil. And I wanted to ask you about how you see the implications of Lula's victory. Also given an important realignment throughout Latin America, right, with the elections in Chile, in Colombia. So I just in Honduras, I could go on, but how do you see that implication throughout the region?
Yes, I think Lula is one of the best head of states that ever lived. I really do. I really do. Uh, one of my biggest hopes is that then the big Brazil come back to the table. I I think it was one of my it was part of my relief. Like now let's talk again about BRICS, right? Let's talk about vaccination when we are still thinking about this pandemic and the next one. Um, let's when we are thinking about the implications of victories, let's go back to the UN. Let's go back to the decade for people of African descent, the new implemented Forum Permanent of People of African Descent. Brazil has so much work to do in the international affairs, and it's so beautiful that the Latin America is also turning. I'm not sure if it's to the left, but I'm going to say at least to the center. Again, that's important. Brazil has a huge role in doing that. And even during his inauguration, not inauguration speech, but victory speech that he made right after the results, he said, I'm going to prioritize Africa Brazil relations again. And I think that that's also a way to go. Brazil under Lula had so many different like development projects with Africa, South South cooperation, with Latin America, strengthening the Mercosur, and I think it's time to go back. And now folks are looking again, okay, who are the big names of the international affairs, of the diplomacy that Lula will bring back? Because I think one of my proud as a Brazilians is of our diplomacy. I think that Brazil plays very, very well done diplomacy in a lot of different issues. And the last time that Lula was president, he was key with the negotiation between Iran and the U.S. around like nuclear, like how do you call energy. So Brazil has so much work to do, and I am excited with that. I think that Lula can also think with Chile, with Colombia, with Francia. How can we move also forward the racial justice agenda? Is a perfect political timing for that, and I think that a lot of his team will also be Black Brazilians. I'm starting to listen a couple of names for a couple of the ministers. I'm hopeful. I think that at least on the international affairs and the diplomacy side, I think it will be a great contribution to the world.
Well, this is, I think, the best possible tone to end in, which is a hopeful tone with a recognition that we have work ahead and that we have solidarity work ahead of us, but also with some hope in the horizon that is visible. So I think with that, Ana, I want to thank you again for your perspective, for your time, for the gift of your conversation. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I really appreciate the invitation. And if I can say some final words, I would say that I believe that what happened in Brazil of the Black movement kind of taking by storm the political power, I believe that we're going to do that in the whole region. That's also part of my hope, and there's also what I'm putting a lot of my effort in seeing Black people, human rights defenders, progressive, as fighting for the dignity and the human rights of our people.
H. Que así sea. Thank you, Ana.